Welcome new and old friends, my name is 2482, and today, 2 got us 5 true creepy ghost stories. And yes, I know this is 2 weeks in a row. So, turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. It wasn't till I was older that I started to realize what was wrong with my parents. In all the years I've known them, they've never blinked. My friend wants to hold a seance, but I'm still a little skeptical. By Zephyrducre. I tend to be a bit long-winded, so apologies in advance for the long post. I'll start with some details about the property. My parents bought this building in a residential area in a rural town in southern East Louisiana in late 2018. They run a medical billing company, which I currently work for, and were looking for a cheap office space to account for their sudden growth they were experiencing. Despite this being a residential property, the layout is pretty weird. There are windows and glass doors completely lining 2 exterior walls, and the other 2 walls are wooden siding. The interior consists of 2 main rooms. The first room was a large open space, a full kitchen and a large island, and a small 6-foot by 10-foot laundry room, which they converted to include a half bath. The second room is completely open and has 2 doors that lead to a small closet and a full bath. The 2 main rooms are separated by an 8-foot wall covered in large glass window panels, and the ceiling reaches a max height of about 16 feet, as it is vaulted. It's on about 2 acres of land with woods along the back of the property. I'll also add the building has a metal roof that will often warp when it heats or cools, resulting in a single, loud popping sound. Now, my parents aren't exactly skeptics, but they don't go looking for this type of stuff either. One evening, shortly after closing on the property, my father was at the building working on some minor repairs and cleaning up the place. I don't know exactly when this took place, as he didn't tell me until much later. But he heard distinct footprints along the wall that separated the 2 main rooms. Sometime after his experience, his good friend was here alone to do some more work on the interior building and claimed to have heard footsteps on the roof. The friend was so sure of what he heard that he grabbed a ladder and went up to make sure no one was up there, of course, finding nothing. After hearing of this, my dad and one of his buddies from church decided to pray over the building, and he says he hasn't had any experiences like that since. I consider myself to be sensitive to the paranormal. I work here in this building full-time, until recently switching to part-time since going back to school, and I occasionally feel the unease you might associate with a presence being nearby. But I was only really here during the working hours. Quick but relevant detail, I came out as non-binary in September 2020 and chose the first name Zephyr. I used Honey as a placeholder middle name before changing it to Ducer, an old family name. Fast forward to the end of 2021, we had a COVID scare in the office and all but 4 employees switched to working remotely, leaving my parents, my sister, and I coming into the office. My parents take this opportunity to sell their house and convert one of the rooms into a living/bedroom. Around the same time, my sister purchases a mobile home to put on the front of the property, and I'm renting a room from her. Now living here, I've been experiencing random episodes of paranoia, surges of anxiety, and pretty bad insomnia. I do have a generalized anxiety disorder, but I've been getting pretty good at coping and recognizing triggers. These episodes don't feel the same. They don't feel like my own emotions. I'm a smoker, and I often sit on the steps of the mobile home for a late-night cigarette. More and more often, I sense a presence either approaching me from the right side or sitting by a tree on my left side. Always the same tree. And then on comes the paranoia. One night, I actually took note that I didn't feel any type of presence, paranoia, or anxiety. As I stood to go inside, I had a sort of unconscious thought of, oh, there she is, immediately followed by my conscious brain saying, what the fuck? Who is she? There were several other minor experiences I've had, items going missing and mysteriously returning right where they were left. A protection charm falling from my car's rearview mirror after hanging there securely for 2 years. But I won't go into any unnecessary detail since this is already running so long. For some reason, my dad brought up yesterday that the previous owner died of cancer here in the house. I found her name in the white pages and looked up her obituary. She had a nephew named Zaf and a niece who went by Honey. They had it in quotation marks next to her actual name. At this point, I'm thinking there's just too many coincidences. I shared all this info with my friend who practices witchcraft and has a little more experience working with spirits, and he suggests we hold a seance. He believes she may be stuck between worlds due to unfinished business. The working theory we have is that when my dad prayed for protection of the house, all he did was form a barrier over the threshold, leaving her locked outside. So I don't know if I'm here looking for advice or opinions. I guess I just wanted to share my story. I'm open to see what anyone has to say, if it's just that I sound crazy. People fled in terror as the alien scum ripped apart our once beautiful city, killing tens of thousands in the process. We had watched him defeat countless powerful enemies and always triumph, and could never have expected that something as simple as dementia could have defeated Superman. Weird Experience Inside a Forest by Kamasylv V. Narrated by Phoenix Fire.
So, today is Sunday, a day I usually go out to hike a route I hiked many times. I don't anymore, but I had to think of it today. This experience is roughly 2.5 years old now, and I haven't gone back to my old routine since then. I live in a pretty small rural village in Germany. Less than 200 people live there. Not much around here besides fields, forests, cows, sheep, a donkey, and 2 horses. Directly outside the house I live in is a road to the right which leads into a field and then into a pretty thick forest. The route I usually take is around 18 kilometers long, or 11 miles for the US readers. I simply will stick to miles to keep it simple. It doesn't usually sound like much, but the route is very rough. It's uphill almost the entire time, and the forest has no roads, so you actually walk through the rough terrain with thick tree roots and bushes, etc. Anyway, I walk this route 1 to 2 times per week, and usually when it's already dark outside. I wear a headlamp for when it's too cloudy out and the moon isn't nicely visible, so I don't trip or get hurt. Why at evening, night? Because I'm usually on the phone with a good friend talking. We live very far apart. It's day for her and it's night for me. I don't mind because that way I don't feel alone hiking. Info dump, because I deem it important. For people who are not familiar with German forests, the most dangerous thing you may encounter is a wild boar, or it's usually pretty safe to just wander around. Almost no wolves where I am, and even if, they would be too shy to just show themselves. Bears are not a thing here. Also, no crazy people living inside the forest. The only thing you encounter is the farmer who drives up like 1 to 2 miles into the road to check on his livestock. After that, it's all forests. No fields anymore anyway. Now, to the weird thing I experienced. Headlamp on, AirPods in, talking to my friend, catching up. For the first 5 miles or so, nothing weird happened. I even had the headlamp turned off, though I wore it on my head. The moon was making enough light, and once your eyes adjust to the dark, you can see quite well, as long as you don't sprint around the forest. Though once I was in the deeper part of the forest, my AirPods started making weird noises, almost like I was losing connection. But I could hear her voice still. It was more like a background buzzing. It wasn't actually interfering with my call. This buzzing went on, and after 20 minutes or so, I noticed that I couldn't see as well anymore as I could. The moon was blocked by clouds, and these clouds didn't look like normal clouds. They looked like thick walls of fog, just way higher than fog should be. I know it's hard to picture, but clouds usually look fluffy or thinned out. These seemed heavy and wet? It's hard to describe. I told my friend to hold on for a minute because I had to focus on something. I don't know why I said that, but focusing on her was disrupting my view of whatever reason. Haha. Sensory overload, I guess. The thing I had to focus on was a huge, thick, deep black cloud. It kind of pushed itself through the fog like clouds and positioned itself right over me. Almost as if it was trying to throw a shadow around an area I was in. The cloud also started to swirl in the middle slightly, and that was when my connection just fell flat. I got the beeping sounds you get when you lose connection, and gone was my phone call. No more bars, no mobile data, nothing. But my AirPods were still buzzing like crazy in my ears. That's when I felt uneasy. Neck hair standing up, cold sweats on my back, and I started turning around to leave because the way ahead just seemed a lot more dark and sinister than my way back. The moment I turned around and started, slightly jogging back because I felt scared, was when I started to hear bell sounds, almost like church bells, but the sound was deeper. That typical ring you hear after a bell sound was just stuck in the air. And it was giving me this weird sensation, as if my bones were suddenly rubbing against each other. It was extremely freaky. All I remember is that I started to go from walking, back to jogging, back to running, back trying to leave the forest and go back to the fields where you start. I didn't look back while running, but I could hear the bell sound getting weaker and further away. And the fog-like clouds were becoming less and less until I finally left the forest and I was back to a normal sky, thin clouds and the moon. Once I got back home, I simply undressed, went into the shower and went to bed, thinking I just simply got spooked today, or maybe I was exhausted and my brain went haywire. I don't know, but I never saw a cloud like that in my life, and church bells are not a thing late at night inside a forest. Never went back to hike that route. Never told anyone, because I'm a bit embarrassed. But I had to think of it today.
The kidnapper held a knife to my youngest child's throat and said, "Which one should I kill quickly, and which one slowly?" 10 years later, my children still look at me like I'm a monster. Experiences while working on a Native American reservation by Cab1218. Hello all. I made a post earlier about how my family and I feel my parents' house is haunted. I've had other experiences outside of that. I will start with the most recent events. I have been working on 2 Native American reservations for a year and a half now. On the current reservation, I have not had any memorable experiences with spirits or the paranormal. But last year, I had multiple at the other. The first started when I was sleeping in the basement of a house I was in, due to having not enough rooms. I was laying on the bed trying to sleep but was unable to too much light coming in. I was night shift. As I lay there, I heard a cardboard box with some of my belongings in it dragged across the floor. I turned and looked at the direction the sound came from and didn't see anything. I got up and walked into the room. Nothing looked out of place, but I couldn't remember if that's where I left it. So I went back to bed, and when I lay down, I heard footsteps above me, but I knew that no one else was home. I just ignored it and eventually fell asleep. Later, I found out other people heard footsteps in that house, and another person saw a shadow person later in the basement. When I came back a month later, I was in a different home. After about 2 weeks, I was laying in bed on my phone when I heard a very loud knock, knock, knock on my bedside table right behind me. I turned to look but saw nothing. A friend attempted to replicate on the window and door, and nothing sounded the same other than that table. Less than a week from then, I rolled from one side of the bed to the other, and as I rolled, I saw an approximately 3-foot tall, all in black shadow run across the foot of the bed. I asked the locals if they knew anything like that and was told about the Weelwala. I'm unsure of the spelling, but there are little people that play pranks. Never had another experience in that home after seeing it. Where I was working, there were many stories of different spirits in different areas of the facility. Late at night, walking around, I always felt like I was being watched. One night, I was sitting in my chair when in the corner of my eye, I see a tall, opaque shadow walk into the room and disappear into the shadow of a door. I let it go as the other person in the room didn't say anything. But then they had to leave, making me the only person in the room. As I look up, I see movement on the blinds, similar to a faint shadow of a tallish man sitting down, wearing a hat. I freaked out and left until she came back. I asked other employees, and they said that corner used to have their table and chair, and that they have seen the man come in many times and sit there. I will make more posts later if you're all still interested. I apologize if I do not tell these well. About 10,000 years ago, an intelligent species lived on Earth who became extinct after a great war. We're yet to completely decipher their language, but we know they called themselves humans. My Paranormal Experiences as a Child by CommieChild. Narrated by Phoenix Fire.
I never really brought this up to many people. I only ever told some of my friends and my cousin. When I was 5, I experienced constant nightmares and strange activities from the deaths of my babysitter and grandpa. My parents had my baby sister, who sadly passed away 3 days after birth due to birth malfunctions. I only have 3 memories of that time. Me playing in the child area with my grandma, me receiving some dinosaur books to keep me company, and seeing her for the first time before she was taking off life support. I had no other memories of her. Shortly after she died, my grandpa died as well. I actually spent quite some time with him, but oddly enough, don't have that many memories of him. Shortly after both of their deaths, I started to have constant nightmares and what seemed to be sleep paralysis. I would wake up frozen in my bed. Voices would go off in my head and my bed would start rapidly spinning. The most vivid memory of this would be the strong pain I would feel in my back that seemed like someone was stabbing me. These dreams would progressively get worse, and the pain I'd feel in my back would become more painful. The voices I'd hear became louder, and eventually I'd start to see figures in my room. Strangely enough, I only had one paranormal experience while living in my apartment I was having these dreams in. It was the middle of the night and my mom was in the kitchen cooking. The way the apartment was laid out had the kitchen next to the long hallway where the bedrooms were located. I was sitting at the end of the hallway, which was right next to where my mom would have been cooking. I was playing with my stuffed dinosaurs and decided to throw one at the end of the hallway. A strange feeling overcame me, and I could do nothing but sit there in silence and stare at the toy I threw. I can vividly remember the toy sit up and start moving toward me. I wasn't scared, but knew something wasn't right either. I tried to call out to my mom, but couldn't yell, as if like I was out of breath. As the toy neared me, it fell over and I could feel myself escape the trance I was in. At that point, I felt nothing. I was still not scared and didn't tell my mom about what had happened. This was the only paranormal thing that happened to me at this apartment other than my recurring lifelike nightmares. About a year into this happening to me, we moved to a duplex further into the city we lived in. There was a small break of the nightmares I had, but they reappeared shortly after. Unlike the ones I had at the previous apartment, these were much more violent and lifelike. The nightmares would usually consist of an order like this. I'd wake up frozen, hearing voices and sweating. I would move my eyes around until I noticed a black figure standing in my room. There would be silence until my blanket would be slowly pulled off of me. A feeling of nausea and dizziness would hit me, and then I could finally sit up and it would stop. This went on for a year with the same pattern. The worst one I had has always stuck with me. Again, the pattern repeated again, but it didn't stop once I sat up. This time, when I did sit up, the voices I heard almost sounded like yelling in my head. I became very hot and extremely dizzy and nauseous. When I was on the same floor as my parents, I did not feel an urge to wake them, but rather run downstairs to the bathroom where I sat over the toilet as if I was going to vomit. My vision felt static somewhat, and the stabbing feeling in my back was extremely painful. The feeling of static I got was very odd. My vision would seem to get darker, but I could see static, if that makes any sense. Imagine your vision seeing those floaties we sometimes see, but they're everywhere you look, and they move around like TV static. That's what I would see. This went on for what felt like an eternity. During this, I could not speak. I felt like someone took my breath and voice and felt helpless. Thankfully, I ended the night falling asleep on the couch after mostly likely passing out. I was in the 5th grade by then and surprisingly never experienced any activities like that again in my life. I would have nightmares every now and then, but they were never as scary as the ones I had previously. I never had a paranormal experience either. I recently brought this up to my cousin, and he told me he felt odd about both the old apartment and duplex I lived in at the time. He said he always felt like there was a bad presence in those houses, which was why he never spent the night. Has anyone else had this feeling as well? I remember it so vividly, but can never understand why it happened or why it stopped so abruptly.
Yesterday, I read about how playing mobile games after trauma can reduce the chances of PTSD and depression. Today, I'm behind a desk, beating my high score again and again as gunshots echo in the hallway. It's been on my mind for a long time. I'll share what I experienced. By Photo Flowery. Hi, before I share my paranormal encounters, I will gently share my family's experiences with the paranormal activity and unexplained things. My mother always had a premonition capabilities and saw things like the Notre Dame being burnt 2 years before it happened. She also predicted and told me to prepare for something that will make people feel sick in the same vision. I can predict the future, not about myself or predict traumatic events like my mom does on a massive scale. I could predict, analyze, and tell my friends if the dude they wanted to ask out was a bad person or a good match for them, predicting their behavior and allowing them to change what was about to happen. Even though I made them aware of it, they were never able to change fate. They always broke up exactly like I predicted, and my friends hated me and rejected me for it. I was able to see their inner self and see if they were damaged or sincere with themselves. My mother had a lot of EMI and also found out later in her life her children are just as normals. She was stellar because of a tumor growing in her ovaries since she was a teen that never got cured or diagnosed as it is. While growing up, I didn't really get affected by ghosts. The only one I remember perfectly was seeing a falling star blow up on the horizon, making me scream and call for my mother about it. When she came, nothing happened, even though the horizon was flaming and stuff. I was about 4 or 5 years old. I studied in healthcare and assistance for aging people. While I was an intern, they asked me to go and bring the elderly into the living room for lunch. I did it. One of the rooms was open with a bright light emitting from it. I asked her if she'd be able to go out by herself, and she told me, "I will wear my greatest robe, worry not, go on and bring the others." After doing this and passing by her door, the door was locked up. In a panic, I ran and asked the guys working there where she was, describing that elderly female. After looking at each other in confusion, they told me she passed away a week before I even came there. This is but one of my stories. And do you want another one? Okay. It was late one summer night, and I was playing Xenoverse on PlayStation 3. I was about 17 at the time. Bored, repeating the same task over and over again. Something scary brought me out of this repetition. I heard, at around 3 a.m., the voice of a girl crying right on my left side. I stopped everything and turned a light on for the room. Nothing. Then I saw a ghost figure running extremely fast in my room, just once, and I never heard or saw anything similar again. You want another one? Well, here's another story. Still in the middle of the night the same year around Christmas. I was trying to sleep when I heard my mother calling for me in the middle of the night. I was scared at first. It was loud AF. I stayed in my bed for about 5 minutes, petrified. Then I investigated. Nothing. My mother? Sleeping and snoring. Scary, huh? The worst experience I had is also quite hard to explain. I was trying to sleep on my right side facing a wall when something just smashed my head out of nowhere. I searched around to see what had fallen on me. Nothing. I saw a ton of UFOs with my nephew. Felt like my brain got hijacked. I asked if he wanted to see something amazing tonight. The night was August 24th, 2014. He accepted. and we stayed watching out my window for a good hour up until when he was bored and wanted to sleep. And they came. A good 100 of stars, glowing spherical objects flying in a military formation without making a single sound. I was enthusiastic and out of control. I stayed at my window and kept watching the spectacle. My nephew, though, was scared to death, going as far as hiding under the bed and begging me to make them go away. One of them came closer to my house and just moved out of point of view. It seemed to us that they fled. But something looking like a black egg scanned the house. There was red lights on our walls. Let's just say my nephew was just crying and thought we were about to die. We stayed up for the rest of the night until we fell asleep early in the morning. Last time I heard anything from him, one of those golden spears was flying above his house. His mom called mine in a total panic, and the call dropped. For months, we didn't have any news about them, and when they came back, they were totally different people mentally. I kept these stories to myself for a long time. Only my mother knew about it, and she believes me. I don't know what happened to my nephew. I feel terrible for him. Something happened that night. This wasn't our imagination. I was 15 and he was 14. I do have some other stories to share, but they are irrelevant compared to these. I wonder if any of you have ever had anything similar happen. Not being able to speak about it to anyone without being mocked or taken for a fool is harder to endure than I appreciate. I had pictures of these flying objects but lost them with my phone. I remember showing people these things, making snake-like forms in them, and got mocked. They said that I had photoshopped it, even though I didn't edit them. These were raw pictures taken with this phone. I regret a ton for not saving them on a hard drive or something. All I can do is draw what I saw or edit photos to show what I experienced that night. And it bothers me. This scares me, haunts me even. What were those things? What happened to my nephew? Why us in particular? Why so young? I will never forgive myself for letting those pictures disappear. They had a lot of meaning to me. And you? What are your experiences? Working in a morgue, you're sure to see some strange stuff, like birth defects, an amputated limb, but this was different. The blood inside of the body was blue. And with that, our time together is coming to an end. As always, I would like to thank the writers who let us read their stories today. Each one gave me a good chill, reminding me that even when you're alone, you might be wrong. And of course, thank you Phoenix Fire for helping me with 2 of these stories. If you didn't know, he just reached 1,000 subscribers himself. If you haven't checked him out already, go want to check him out once this video's done. Links are always down below. I also know that this week was a bit weird since we had 2 day stories back to back. But next week, for Christmas, I have 2 Christmas horror stories for you. I just need to line that up a bit better. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. Now, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. Of course, if you'd like to help this podcast/YouTube channel, please just share these stories with anyone who might enjoy them. If you'd like to help in other ways, I have Patreon, memberships, merch, and PayPal. All the links are down below, including the ones to my socials and other things. Last but never least, I would love a comment, but I gotta get you that Sunday word first. On screen right now is everyone who left me a comment last week. It was really nice to get all those comments, guys. Thank you so much as always. Now, let's move on to this Sunday's word, which is transparent. So if you're on YouTube, just leave me a comment down below and you'll be in next week's video/photo. If you're on the podcast or somewhere else where you can't leave a comment, just @ me on Twitter and leave me a comment using that word as well, and you'll also be in next week's video/photo. But as always, guys, thank you for watching and listening. It really means the world to me. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.